Cool, so this is the NWC Show, episode 30, and if you would like to introduce yourself.
I'm Tier 0 Taylor Bryden. I've been a professional wrestler in Scotland since 2005, and I'm on the podcast to chat about wrestling today, which I'm looking forward to.
Man, I think I kind of started wrestling round about the same time, so I started going to training when I was like 13, which was a long time ago. It must have been like 2004, I think it was, I started going to wrestling training. So
who was that about? Was that with SWA, or as it was SCW as it was known back then?
The one in Linwood, the SWA one up in...
Or Area 52?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah,
I've honestly, that's the first time I've heard somebody say the name. I was mind blank on that name for so long. You've just brought it back to me.
I actually messaged Thomas Kerrins, who actually put on a picture of it on his Instagram story the other day there, and it was the old Area 52 training building with the Chinese next door, and that Chinese was absolutely deadly at the time, because you'd be sitting doing drills and all you would smell through the walls would be that Chinese, and you'd have a trainer sitting eating his chicken fried rice as you're sitting doing burpees and running up a bloody hill. It wasn't exactly the best. It wasn't exactly the best smell to be smelled when you're training.
And the thing, obviously, you're probably the first person, well, one of the first people that I've talked to that have started training at that time. It's either the people I spoke to is like, we started in like the 90s, or they've just totally missed that point. But like, it was that kind of transition period in wrestling, well, Scottish wrestling, from like literally being nothing to where it is now. So obviously that period was, I think it's so weird to go back and look at that and then seeing how far it's came now with like ICW and Discovery and stuff like that.
Well, if you think about it, like, we were kind of like the start of a new generation, because when wrestling ended in the sort of 90s in Britain, and then the tribute shows started happening, so you had like Jake, was it Jake Hawkins, Jake the Fake? He used to run like the tribute wrestling shows, and he'd have the fake Undertaker, the fake Kane, and there was no like sort of original guys. Like the World of Sport era and our era, there was a big disconnect between the two of them. And it was really like starting from scratch. I think at that time, 2004, 2005, you had BCW was about, you had SWA, and then W3L was a new sort of start out, and then PBW followed like a couple of years after that. And that was kind of like the sort of start of the scene in wrestling. I mean, I didn't come through till SWA until 2008, 2009, but I had started like with W3L back in 2005. So like and that was like the first sort of wrestling that was over the east coast of Scotland, especially in Fife.
Yeah, I think it's so weird. Like that, like you just said, that's literally what I try and explain to people. You've just summed it up greatly. Is like there's such a disconnect. There was a whole period when wrestling was booming across the whole world, but there was like nothing here. It was just those tribute shows, like the fake Undertaker, the fake Kane, Red Kane against Green Kane and stuff like that, which was so awkward. Like, this is what we have got. You've got like the Rock, Austin, like the real guys. These guys just WCW killing it and stuff like that, and we've got this, which was so embarrassing. But like you say, it's also cool for me being at that point when it was just kind of like you said, it was a starting from scratch, completely from the bottom, and it was really cool to see how far it's came. So I left wrestling because I broke my neck round about that 2009, 2008 time. So probably just as we would have crossed paths if I kept in it, but then obviously I was injured and had to leave, which is so weird. But I think it's cool speaking to somebody from that time, because a lot of people trying to explain to them how weird it was to go to training back then as well. Like, it was always called I think the one in Linwood was just like in an industrial estate, garage, door was opened, there was like a toilet right there, and then it was like ring, mat, that's it, nothing else. You don't need anything else, that's all you need. And it was, when you look at guys now, like the younger guys that are at ICW, Source and stuff like that, and it's like they've got like all the bells and whistles, everything. They've got like cool gyms and stuff like that. And it was like, I didn't have weights. Like, it was weirdly dodgy. You turned up on a Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Somebody opens up this like garage dorms, like, we're training in there, and you're like, oh, this doesn't seem right, but it's so weird.
and then they'd be like, right, and you've got to run around the industrial estate to warm up, run up the hill carrying somebody on your shoulders. Like, it was a very different time in wrestling. I mean, everybody that sort of trained me was fairly new to wrestling themselves. Like, it was only like in sort of 2008, like when we started getting like people that had been wrestling in the 90s, like in to actually help train us. So there was like an entire new generation of wrestler coming for that point, and it was a lot of trial and error for people because we didn't have anybody to hand over the old ways of wrestling, like from the 80s or early 90s to what we ended up doing. So yeah, it was a baptism of fire at the time, and nobody really knew what they were doing. Well, obviously in the ring, but in terms of promoting and actually how to appropriately train people, and also like training them professionally, so that you weren't just getting trained in the ring, you were getting trained to be a professional, trained to respect the business. Like, they were never things that were like at the forefront of people's training. Whereas now, I'd say those are things that people are taught straight away how to get themselves over without ever wrestling a match, able to cut promos and use their social media influence to make a name for themselves before they even took 100 bumps. That's crazy. Big
Yeah,
difference.
I think you're the first person as well that's remembered the runs. Like, no, like, see, I always say to people, the first time I turned up at wrestling training, like 13-year-old, and I was like, I wonder what this is going to be like. Like, it was just the first ever class I went to was a real freestyle wrestling class, and the guy took my money, was like, I know where you want to go, and just leered me for like an hour. And then he was like, next week I'll pick you up and take you there. And I was like, no, I don't want picked up. You just like threw me around for like no reason. But it was a cool like learning experience. But when I went, the guy was just, it was like 12 new people. It's like the Sunday all day class, and he was like, right,
Yeah.
just go for a run around the industrial estate. And it was that little hill kind of thing that used to just ruin you. And I remember I just kept running because I wanted to impress these wrestlers, and everybody else was leaving, being sick. And the guy comes out and he's like, man, I totally forgot you were still here. I thought you just left with everybody else. And I was like, thanks, man. And he was like, you want to come in? We can teach you some stuff now. But like you say, everybody's learning different now, and actual learning like a professional way to be professional. Back when I
Yeah.
remember my trainer was 18, like he wasn't that much older than me. Like, he was like, I've had 3 professional matches, but I got lucky because I met this guy who ended up becoming best friends with, and I went to Holland to do some work, so I learned off of some like Dutch kind of skills, and there was like a
Yeah.
Japanese guy and stuff like that. So we learned a lot of cool different stuff, which is one of the reasons I left the kind of SWA skills, because I was like, these guys don't know a lot of stuff. It sounds so bad, but it was like they had the in-ring stuff down, but like like you say, the promo skills, the you would know yourself. Like, at that point, it was just people were like, I think this is how you do it. Like, there
Yeah.
wasn't anything that's like, oh, this is set in stone how you do it. It was like, I'm sure this is it, or we can try this out, which was
Yeah.
so weird. It felt like, what are we doing here sometimes? Which was, it's cool to speak to somebody that's experienced it as well.
Oh no, I definitely experienced that. Weird. Oh, it was a nightmare. Like back at W3L in sort of 2006, 2007, we had like guys like Carol Conroy who had worked in the 90s and had done like a lot of stuff like down south. And he'd moved up here and he was running his own promotion at the time. And he was also helping train on one of the days that Mike's. We used to train a Wednesday, Thursday, and a Sunday. And before you were even allowed in the ring, there was just judo mats on like a concrete floor in an industrial estate, and it was like 50 back bumps, 50 flip bumps, 50 front bumps, 50 fish tails, and then we can start wrestling. And oh, by the end of it, because fair enough, you've got some break where the dojo mats, but after bump 20, 25, you're absolutely knackered. But you weren't allowed to wrestle until you managed to get through it. So it wasn't even like a warm up, like do burpees, like calisthenics, warming yourself up, getting ready, loosen yourself up for the ring. It was just absolute torture. Like, can you survive this? And if you do, I'm going to stretch you when you get in the ring. And by no means I'm trying to say that we were stretched like people in the 80s and 70s ever were, but you were taught you were stretched, rightfully or wrongfully, you were stretched before you ever got to do any sort of lookups in the wrestling ring.
Yeah, man, my first couple of classes, I just remember, so it was like you'd go the all day kind of thing, then later on some other people would kind of come in and stuff like that. So normally it would have like 3-4 different parts to it, so people would just drop in. I just wanted to go all day, so I was like a sponge. I wanted to learn this business as much as possible. And I remember there was this guy, he was like 26, I was like a 13-year-old, and it was like we were doing like forearms. So this is probably like a month maybe just over a month in, and he was just like hitting me as hard as he could. And I'm one of those people that'll just like, I was like, I'm just going to take this and then I'm going to hit him as hard as I could because I'm really competitive. And then I just remember hitting this guy and he just went straight out, and I was like, oh, I've literally killed somebody. As a kid, I was like, oh shit, I've hurt somebody in like wrestling. This isn't meant to be a work. It's not meant to hurt somebody. And the trainer was like, sorry, mate, that happens all the time. He's like, that guy's always annoying. He's like, I just thought I'd pair with you, so what it's like. And I'm like, why did you? I was a 13-year-old child, but like you say, like, it wasn't nothing like active stretching. You didn't do like stretching to like warm your body up to go into the ring. It was just like, okay, here's go do 1,000 burpees and go run 6 miles and then come back, and then we'll start to like do like shoot wrestling, and then you're going to practice headlocks a day. And you're like, why are we doing burpees for headlocks? That doesn't make any sense. But let's say it's cool to speak to somebody that experienced that point in wrestling, because a lot of people take for granted what they've got just now, like the ICW skills, source skills, the skills all across Scotland, the amount of wrestling there is. But it's like when you take it for granted, you're like, you don't know what it was like back in the new kind of era days. If that makes sense.
Sort of the beginning of wrestling, right? Just about the beginning of wrestling retaking off, because you had the original sort of guys from BCW and SWA, like because you had your Red Lightnings and your Wolfgangs and Darkside. I remember the first wrestling show I ever went to was outside of like a fake, like the Undertaker Kane sort of wrestling show. I went to a show in the Rothers Halls in 2004, and that had like Wolfgang on it, and I think Spinner McKenzie was on it. I'm trying to think, Phil Powers as well. And that was like the first sort of proper wrestling show. There's no tribute acts on it at all. And the UK Bulldogs as well, like the Bulldogs, the Pit Bulls, I can't remember their name. They're two massive guys. Like they were huge. Like 15-year-old me thought these guys could probably kill them. They were just massive. And I remember seeing those guys there, and then later on finding out like they were sort of like the beginnings of sort of Scottish wrestling, like your Drew McIntyres and your Wolfgangs, like everybody that sort of started in that era that's still going in wrestling today. And it's good that they've been able to take the experiences that they had and evolve them and actually pass them on to the new generation. So there's no disconnect. Like the people that started wrestling in the 2000s in the UK have actually passed on their knowledge to the people that started wrestling in the 10s and then now in the 20s as well.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think like it's probably like that older generation time, like the World of Sports era. And then, like, I remember one of my first shows is going to go see, and Darkside was there. There was a bunch of wrestlers. Because I knew who he was because he came to like training one time. And then I went to the show, and there was just a bunch of guys sitting. It was in Bells Hill, which is like the sports complex. Yeah. And he was like just sitting, like eating chips, and there was a bunch of wrestlers. And I was feeling like, this is so cool. These guys are just sitting. But like, that's how casual wrestling used to be back then. Like a lot of people forget, like it was like they could just go sit and eat chips with like talk to people. It doesn't matter. Like at that point, like you didn't really have like obviously like a Darkside, your Wolfgang, Drew McIntyre, all that kind of stuff. These people coming up, but it was like now when you look at it, you're like there is a lot to be proud of for kind of Scottish wrestling. And then it's like obviously all that time, all the kind of industrial estate wrestling next to a Chinese and stuff like that. You had to put all that time in to get to where it is now, when I would say we're producing some of the best wrestling in the world in a minute, especially with like guys in ICW, obviously Drew McIntyre's in WWE, who you could arguably say he's one of the best in the world at the minute. But I think it's so cute.
Definitely would.
So cool to see that kind of how the progression has came. So I forgot to ask the first question, but we always ask everybody, so I'll get into that just now, is how did you get into wrestling? I know we've kind of covered that a little bit, but what was that kind of itch that you were like, I want to go do this? How did you get that feeling for it?
Well, like I started watching wrestling quite late compared to like a lot of my friends. Like I only started watching wrestling when we got Sky when I was like maybe 10, and as soon as I started watching it, I just loved it, and it was just over the top. Like I think it was 1999 that I started watching wrestling, because the only event that I remember from that time as like being the first event was Survivor Series 1999, where it was Rock, Triple H, and Big Show for the title, and Big Show went over that night. So that was like the first thing. Although maybe I just watched it just before that because I remember watching Bossman versus Big Show when they had the feud over Big Show's dad, and they did the whole funeral thing where he was holding on to the head, like the coffin, and he's getting dragged away. So maybe I started watching just before that, but I just, as soon as I started watching, I just loved it. Larger than life. Like I was always into like Power Rangers and like fighting sort of animes when I was younger. So it was just real life fighting, real life sort of soap opera way fighting in it, and I just loved it. So I kind of always wanted to do it, but I didn't actually realistically think, because as I say, there was nothing at the time. I didn't realistically think that I was actually going to get an opportunity. I'd heard there was a training school down in Manchester at the time, which I think was probably FWA, but I'm not sure. But I wanted to do it. I thought, well, when I'm old enough, like I'll maybe try and go down there. But then it just so happened that in the Fife Free Press, my local paper, when I was just before I turned 16, they had a advertisement up for a wrestling training school that was opening in Kirkcaldy. And I just thought, well, it's 10 minutes along from my house. Like I've got no excuse not to go. So they opened on the 13th of March 2005, and my birthday was on the 10th of March. So I'd literally just turned 16 3 days before I'd started training. So I just went for it, and when I turned up, just like you said, there was 20 people the first day we were there. The next week there was about 12. Week after that, you're lucky if there was 4. And from that crop of people that turned up at that time, I'm the only person out of that group that's still wrestling.
Man, that's such a cool story as well. Like I think there's a lot of people that misconstrue as well that when I say like, oh, like it was so hard to get into wrestling back then, because it was like there was nothing. Like you had to search Google. Like I remember searching for a wrestling school and it would come up like London, Manchester,
Yep.
Cardiff, stuff like that, and it's like there's none in Scotland. You had to really, really find it. But one of my friends knew there was a guy that was doing wrestling training, turned out to be the real one, and then he was like, no, I know like where the professional wrestling school is, I'll take you there. But it was like word of mouth. You had to kind of try and find it, and like obviously you sound like old men sitting saying people are so lucky today, but it was like, it's so cool to see how like you would definitely be able to see the difference from when you first started to still being active in the business just now. And like he says, a lot of people forget, a lot of people start training and then they'll never do anything with it because it's really taxing on your body mentally as well, because you're trying to hurt somebody, you try to you need to stay in good fitness and that kind of stuff as well. And people forget how much cardio it takes to do wrestling, which I never realised when I was younger. When I went at 13, I just remember being like, this is a lot of running to be doing for like a wrestling match. I thought we're just going to go in the ring and run around, but it's a ton of cardio.
Well, we didn't even have, when I first started training for about the first year, we didn't even have a ring. It was mats in a community centre. Like actually, it wasn't even a community centre. It was like, do you remember like at high school where there'd be like a porta cabin at the side, and that'd be like a classroom, just a temporary classroom, but I'd be there about 20 years later. It was something like that, and we used to bump on that, and we bumped so much that we actually snapped the main beam that ran right across the community centre. Like there was a divot in the floor where the main beam had snapped just for us bumping every week on it. So yeah,
I think those stories are like so cool as well. Like when you speak to the guys like our age that done it at that point, like when they've got tons of stories. Like I think the ring that was in that place that I used to go to in Linwood was the ring that the SWA used to travel with. Like it was like,
it was, yeah.
Yeah, I remember they were like, oh, there's no class this weekend because we need to take us down and take it somewhere. And I was like, all right, that's pretty weird. But it was like, that's how literally no wrestling there was. And I always feel poor, like the guys at like BT Gun, Darkside, Wolfgang, at that point as well, they were still pursuing a career in wrestling when it was like SWA and a few things were coming up. But there was a period of time when there was just nothing, which I think is mind-boggling when you look at it just now. But I keep telling people, if I could go back in time, I would do it again, because it built character, and it was just a bunch of Scottish people that loved wrestling. That's what it really was. Like you say, you're in like one of those temporary classrooms, which I think everywhere in Scotland's got them, that are there for like the majority of like the building. But like it's just so cool. Like everybody would just turn up. I remember turning up, everybody was like, oh, you need to run home, or they'd text you, you want to come and do, like, practice some stuff, and obviously we're not meant to try outside the class, but things like that happen. But I think it's so cool. It was like a community feeling back then, a little bit more than I feel you might get just now. Mind you, I've not been in a wrestling training school since I broke my neck, so I fell out of love with it for a little bit. But I feel it was a pure ton of community feeling back then, because it was like we just need to make stuff happen. Like, I would go build a ring. They would, like, a 14-year-old on like a Saturday night going to go build a ring myself with just a bunch of wrestlers was so awkward, but I loved it. Just thinking back to it, I'm like, I'd definitely go back and do that again. Then now they've got, like, obviously the workers building it. They've got, like, rules, respect, and stuff like that. Back then, it was just like, okay, we need somebody to come and build this ring because we can't do it, which is so weird. Like, it's all professional. If it makes sense, like, it's more professional now than what it was.
Oh,
back
100%.
then.
Yeah, no, but people have got a better idea what they're doing. People have had, like, there's been people come in that have had experience, that have done seminars with people, and it's through those people coming in that have been more involved in wrestling or involved at a higher stand, like working for All Star and stuff like that, that have came in and sort of raised the professionalism in Scotland and in Britain as a whole. Because I think it would be naive to say that it was just Scotland that had no wrestling scene. I think in England, like, you had maybe FWA down south, and that was pretty much it for a long time. Because I remember watching FWA on the wrestling channel on Sky Sports before I'd even knew what, like, wrestling in the UK was. I thought, here's me thinking, when I went to my first wrestling show, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be like a small WWE. But no, it was very much like kind of a tribute show that had Kane and the Undertaker in it, so it was very different. But yeah, like, it's great to see that people have managed to build it up. I mean, especially in, like, the northeast of England, like, that's up and coming, and then Scotland itself is just an entire region's done brilliantly. Like, there's anywhere you go in Scotland, there will be a show not far from you. Obviously, outstanding COVID times, but, like, before that, wrestling in Aberdeen everywhere. Wrestling past Aberdeen and Wick, like, sort of Thurso, stuff like that, guaranteed to be there. West Side, covered for head to toe. And then the East, all the way down through to Yorkshire, like, Scottish promotions running all the way down there. So there's loads of opportunities now that wasn't there before. There is also about maybe 100, 200 wrestlers that are all looking for work at the same time, though. But it just adds to a competitive scene, and it adds talent and drive to everybody wanting to get better.
Definitely, man. Like you say, back when we were kind of breaking in, there was only like a handful of companies. Like, I've had Shady and Actress on here for, like, Target Wrestling and stuff like that, which is, they're doing, like, great stuff. And it's like, you look everywhere. Like, it was the whole point. Like, UK, even Europe as well, there was, like, one or two promotions here or there, and it was just nothing. But like you say, it makes I think that's why people are getting so good and so interested in wrestling in Europe and the UK as well. Is it's just, there's so much competition. Like, there's so many things going on, and like you say, there'll be a small community hall that's got a wrestling show on like a Saturday morning, Saturday night, and stuff like that. So much stuff kind of happening at the minute. So how have you found being in the business, so to speak, during COVID times? Have you found it hard, or have you found it's gave you some motivation to, like, work on different parts of your game and stuff like that?
Well, I suppose, like, what can you do? Yeah, like, you can't actually do any actual training because you're not allowed to touch anybody. I mean, it's hard to wrestle somebody 2 meters away from somebody. So I've just really been focusing on my fitness this year, man. Like, I had it in my head for ages that I needed to be a heavyweight because that's what everybody wanted. But I'm 5'7", 5'8" in boots. Like, a heavyweight is not something I'm going to be in. I was completely misinformed or uneducated, my own fault, on how to get where I wanted to be. So I had, like, the start of last year, I think I was like 205 pounds, but I just looked like crap. Like, I hated myself. I wasn't happy. Like, I'd been trying to be a heavyweight, and I never came out of that perpetual bulk because I just thought, like, this is what I want to be. But being the size I am, you're best just going for what you're sort of sized for. So this year I've just spent all my time leaning down. Like, I'm down to 158 pounds now. Like, I'm feeling lean, I'm feeling strong, I'm feeling ready to get in the ring. My cardio's never been better, and I'm ready just to wrestle. Like, that's it. Like, it's been such a long time now. Like, at February or March last year was my last proper match, and I'm ready to get the spandex on, get the fake tan on, and get out wrestling. And I suppose, like, the only other things that I've really been able to work on is sort of my promo skills and my social networking skills, because that's something that I've not put enough stock in over the past 16 years. Like, I never thought that social media mattered much, but watching people now, as I say, like, not even wrestling matches and managing to create a buzz about themselves without having any footage, without having any real training, any substantial training behind them. It just shows you the power of social media. So that's been a big thing this year, trying to be more active on social media and trying to hopefully create more content that I've got that I can actually use to promote myself and actually make myself a brand that is appealing for promoters to book. So just working on the overall package, I would say, has been this year's goal.
Definitely, man. I think the social media game's cool with Target Wrestling. They were doing like the World Championship
Yeah,
thing.
no, it was really interesting to see all the promos that went in. Like, it showed a lot of creativity. There was a lot of Scottish guys that put in stuff, and one in particular, Zero's promo was amazing. Like, it was so good, and totally deserving to actually get forward in that tournament.
I think the guy that we had on here was Roy Story, and he's like just done some training. He's never really actually been in the ring and stuff like that, but he's like at the top of people love his promo so much, and it just shows you like you can build like this social media presence, like you were saying, and you don't have to like have this like obviously in-ring ability is what you kind of need for wrestling, but you can build the kind of online persona before you get to that point as well, which
Yeah, definitely.
It's cool to hear that you're saying you're working on the both sides. I think that's probably the thing that everybody forgets. You need to be like all-rounded, and that's why obviously it's a learning experience being in wrestling, and like you're saying, you're 16 years in, you're still learning that experience, which is pretty cool. But man, you're saying about your weight and stuff like that, so I was the opposite. I've always been like smaller. I'm about the same height as you. I'm like 5'8", 5'9". Just adding on 5'8", 5'11".
Yeah.
But no, I've always been like smaller, always been quite shredded. I wanted to get that bigger feel. So that was like, I wanted to lift more weights, get more heavier, put on some like substantial mass, because I've never really got to that point after I broke my neck. And then this year I've just spent just picking up weights, eating good, doing on this diet, and I'm like the best I've ever felt. Like I'm like 207 at the minute, but I want to cut back. I'm going to cut down to like 195, but like I'm literally the best I've ever felt. I'm in the best shape of my life, and people are like, "Oh, you're looking bigger," and I'm like, "Thanks." Like, this is what I've been trying to get to for most of my life, because I've always been around that like 158, 160 mark, and now being at that 205, I feel great. Like, I'm like, this is the strongest I've been in in a long time, which is, I think it's cool when, like you were saying, I think a lot of people forget you don't have to be a heavyweight. You can fit your body mass, like the way you look. Like, I think a lot of times people like our height might go, you can be like 210 and you just look terrible unless they have like good genetics or put in a lot of work. But then, like you're saying, you're happy being at 158, you're ready to go. And man, I think you look shredded when you the picture for the thumbnail that we've got here. I was like, this guy's like shredded, like really, really cool. And it's just adds to, like, you're adding that social media aspect. You've got the look, you've got the in-ring ability. It's just bringing it all together, which is, I've been on a binge for your matches the past week or so. So it's been fun really watching your stuff recently.
Good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. But yeah, I'm not quite happy at 150. Like, I wanted to cut down. My goal for last year was I wanted to get to 17% body fat. That was a goal. I wanted to be at 17, and I changed my training regime when gyms reopened, and I really hit hard and done a couple of different things between September and December. And on Christmas Eve last year, I got a 3D body scan. I was actually at 12.4%. So, like, really happy. Like, between September and the December, I'd put on 6 pounds of muscle and lost 6 pounds of fat, and I was feeling good. But I'm hoping that in the next little while, when gyms reopen, I'm going to go into a lean bulk, and I'm going to try and bulk up to 160, 170. If I could hit those numbers and do it completely naturally, I'll be 100% happy with the way I am, and I'll be able to work with that. Because that's like at 5'7", 5'8", if you could be like quite low body fat and manage to still be 170 pounds, then you're going to look decent, and that's the plan.
Yeah, man, definitely. I have like this weird genetics that my body fat is just always extremely low. Like I just do not retain body fat at all. It's when I used to do personal training in college, the teacher used to be like, "Why do you never have any body fat on you?" Like, you could just be like, "Okay." We used to do like experiments. To be like, "Okay, for a couple of weeks, you eat cakes and stuff like that. You eat like a diet plan, and let's kind of see where it goes to." And I would be the worst person to do it for. My body fat always stays at the exact same. Like, I think the highest I've ever been is like 25%. And that's like when I tore my calf muscle and I wasn't training at all. But like,
Yeah.
I'm normally always about that 18, 17 mark. But then if I really get training, which I'm dying for the gyms to open back up so I can get more lean, it drops right down to like 12, 8, even 6%, which is insanely little. Like, you shouldn't go to 6%. Sometimes you can feel sick at that point. But I think it's weird. I have that weird genetic disposition at this point. You can look at me and be like, "Oh, this guy's like the same height as me," but like I probably look smaller than you. Like, I've just got that weird genetic thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. It's just how everybody is. Like, I naturally store body fat. I'm not, and that's due to like because of the way that I was training before. Like, my metabolic rate was pretty low, whereas now, just like by regulating my diet, by doing like a reverse phase out of a deficit and sticking in maintenance, managed to reset my metabolism. Like, I'm doing better now, and I'm still able to eat like 2,600 calories and maintain my 12.4% body fat. But I'm hoping to push it up to like maybe just about 3,000 calories a day, and just slowly try to increase maybe half a pound of muscle mass per month. And I know that's slow, but slow and steady and sustainable is what I'm going for. And hopefully, like, I'll be able to reach my goals by the end of this year. That's the plan anyway. And I'm laser focused, ready to go for it.
Definitely, man. That kind of slow, steady, just taking it easy. Like, I wish people, like, when you see them going like fad diets and stuff like that, I'm always like, just take it easy. Like, if you lost it over the year, it looks better. You'll feel better. You've put work in. Plus, I love going to the gym, so anything I always try and like change up what I'm doing. So like, I'm trying to put on some weight. Maybe I try and lose some stuff. Try and work on different areas. It's just something that I love doing. We've just probably spent the last 10 minutes talking about gym stuff instead of wrestling. I know people will be out there like, let's turn it into a personal training podcast. So what's something that we'll do a negative side then. So what's something that you dislike about wrestling at the minute? So like the wrestling world, community, whatever you would call it. What's something that you dislike about wrestling?
There's not really anything that I dislike about wrestling. Like, there's obviously like you'll be watching a match and maybe you'll think, oh, I don't like that. I don't like how that was done. But I genuinely do believe there is a place for everything in wrestling. Like, if you're wanting death matches, there's 100% a place for that. If you're wanting somebody that does athletic cruiserweight style matches, there's a place for that. You want scientific wrestling, there's also a place for that. And if you just want somebody that's slow and lumbering and just a big attraction, then there's a place for that as well. Um, I suppose if there's one gripe that I've got about wrestling is the way that sometimes you can get ridiculous near falls. Things like people getting Canadian destroyed for the top rope and kicking out at 1.5. That's something that I think it disrespects like fans' intelligence, and it disrespects like professional wrestling. Like, I know that the whole thing about professional wrestling is having to what can you do next to be bigger, but being bigger doesn't always mean being better. Sometimes you just need to be a wee bit smarter. Like, I would rather see a Canadian destroyer end a match than it ever be a near fall in any match. Like, I just think it looks like a cool move. And see, back in 2004, 2005, when only Petey Williams was doing that move, like, it was legit one of the best finishers in professional wrestling. And then as people do, like, absolutely wore it into the ground, where now it's as much a transitional move as a wrist lock.
No, man, I definitely agree with that. Like, there's so, like, back then when Petey Williams was doing it, that the Canadian Destroyer was just like, it was like everybody wanted to know how to do it. Then everybody started learning how to do it, and then it just got spoiled. Which is, I get what you're saying. Like, I think there is a time in, like, I would rather see a Canadian Destroyer finish a match like you says, instead of from watching it midway through the match and then somebody just like gets back up and you're like obviously that's going to hurt. We've been watching it for 10 years hurting. Let's just keep it hurting. Like,
Yeah.
we're
And then
not.
and the thing is, and then when they hit the Canadian Destroyer later in the match, the one with a schoolboy, and it's just I totally get the guy's worn down and he managed to get a sneak roll up, but I just think it's just no how I like my professional wrestling. I love a roll up finish, but not after you've dropped under their head maybe 3 or 4 times. It's just not believable for me. I prefer stuff to look like a sports based presentation, if you will. And although you could watch my matches and you could say that I'm 100% guilty of not making things sport based, like more sports entertainment, but that's something that over the next year that I'm going to try and make a transition to do. Try and make it more realistic, more gritty, and stop like nothing needs to be fancy. Like make it look real. That's the plan. That's a plan for the next year.
Definitely, man. There's a lot of guys like Dean Ford that we had on does like that kind of martial arts kind of style because he was a kickboxer before, and
Well,
he like,
he's got a legit background in that. So like the
yeah,
man's won like titles in
I
his
know.
own discipline.
I think it's so cool. Like, I love watching his stuff because I went and done martial arts after wrestling, and like it's something that I really like, still like. So watching that brings it in. But like you said, like, sometimes it's just cool to go back to basics, like bring that grittiness in, and you don't need to do like all the kind of flashy, fancy stuff. Like, you can just be, you could make a kick look really hard. Like, everybody knows what it's like to get kicked or punched, so you can make them look really good. So on the flip side of that question is, what's something that you like about wrestling today? What's something you like about the world of wrestling?
Pretty much just what I've said. The variety. There is something for everybody. If you're talking about what I really enjoy though, is I've really been enjoying watching Pro Wrestling Noah recently. Like that was one of the first things that got me into sort of, if you would class it as that, indie wrestling, because on the wrestling channel it was one of the things that they showed all the time was like the Global Honor Crown matches, like Mitsuhiro Misawa, Kenta Kobashi. You had like what was his name, Takayama, like different workers for there and how hard they hit. And I know that's kind of counterintuitive to my point about landing on heads and then getting beat with like a clothesline, but like the strong style, the King's Road style was always like that. But yeah, I've been enjoying getting back into it after Pro Wrestling Noah had sort of like a little lull in the early 2010s, and now like back up to being one of the best promotions in the world.
Definitely, man. I think the variety for wrestling as well is just insane. Like it says, you can, everybody's got their spot. Like, from that death match to like the technical wrestling. If you like death matches, there's a bunch of promotions that does that. You like the technical stuff, there's a bunch that does that. The entertainment side, like, everything is there for everybody. And running a channel like mine, it's great. Like, I can literally watch wrestling every day and do a review on it the next day. So it's good for me, and I get to speak to you guys. Like, speaking to wrestlers and stuff all across the world is, it's fun. Like, it makes me feel like I can still participate in wrestling. I get the itch so bad, like, to get back in the ring, maybe go back to training and stuff. But because of my injuries, I'm like, no, can I do it? But doing this scratches that itch a little bit. Like, it makes me feel a little bit normal, if that makes sense as well.
Yeah, it does. And it's good for everybody in the wrestling community because we feel like podcasts like this and SWN, a lot of people wouldn't have like a platform to actually be able to speak or to be able to engage with people on a different level. So it's great for people to actually do it.
Definitely, man. And where do you see yourself in 10 years? Do you see yourself getting a call up to like NXT UK or WWE, AEW, something like that? Or do you see yourself working for Noah? Or where do you see yourself in like 10 years?
That's a hard
I
question.
know that's a
Where,
hard
where,
one.
where, where would I like to be?
Aye, where would you like to be?
I would like to be fulfilled in wrestling. I would like to be able to say, because up till now I've done cool stuff in wrestling. I've wrestled all over Scotland and I've wrestled in bits of England, but I want more. Like I want to say that I've been able to wrestle in Europe. I want to earn the right to have a chance to wrestle in Japan. I'm not saying for a Noah or a pro like New Japan. I would just like the opportunity to be able to go over there and wrestle somewhere, like in a new country, and be able to experience it. I just want to, when I finish up, whenever that is, whenever I'm allowed to wrestle to, I just want to say that I'm happy with what I've done, and wherever that leads, I'll just have to wait and see. Like as I say, I would love all those things that you're saying. I would love NXT. I would love working for AEW. I would love working for WWE. Realistically, 32. Not like just getting into what I'm going to class as the prime of my career, where I feel that I'm going to do my best work, but whether I can actually do it or not, that's going to be up to me, and whether I can continue putting in the effort that I'm doing just now. And if I continue doing that, I think that I can do something in wrestling.
Definitely, man. I think for your kind of style, I could see you in that NXT UK Japanese kind of style stuff. That's why I was asking that question, because it would just slot in there so good. Like, it would bring a different aspect to the NXT UK kind of style that they've got, that kind of hard hitting UK style. Then obviously in Japan, your style pretty much would just slot right in there, which is the reason I was trying to ask that question. Obviously, that's one of the most positive answers I've had. Most people are just like, either I don't know where I'm going to go, or like I'm only going to go to this place. It's cool, obviously, to be driven, like I want to be here, but then sometimes it's like you're saying, I just want to be fulfilled. I just want to be happy within a sport that you've been doing for so long. So heading into the end of the podcast, we have 3 questions, 2 that I've sent you over, and 1 that I always keep a surprise for everybody. So if you've listened to the show, you would hear this one. People either got their answer straight away or the hum and haw. It's a cool conversation, but we'll start at the beginning. So who's your favourite wrestler of all time? Who would you say is your favourite guy or girl of all time?
I think there's 2 people, and I said this on the other podcast as well. So Eddie Guerrero and Shawn Michaels, as I can't really draw between the 2 of them, like both for different reasons. Like, I always remember Eddie Guerrero being one of the first people that I watched and absolutely loved it. It was when he came back in sort of 2002, and he had that feud with RVD over the Intercontinental title and the Frog Splash, and then he transitioned over to SmackDown, and he had one of my favourite matches of all time, which was it was a no disqualification match against Edge, just on a random episode of SmackDown, and it's one of those matches that just stands in my mind all the time. Like Eddie wearing his shiny red tights and Edge wearing his sort of purpley blue coloured, like pre-rated R tights that he wore when he was coming out to Rob Zombie's Never Gonna Stop. And Shawn Michaels, like, because I didn't start watching wrestling to 1999, I thought Shawn Michaels was just some commissioner guy that occasionally did run-ins. I had no idea what he was in the 90s. And then when he returned in 2002, SummerSlam, somewhere around there, and I watched him for the first time, and then watched him deliver great match after great match, great program after great program, like delivering amazing promos, like just hitting out of the park, whether he was a babyface, which he was for most of his run when I seen him, or that slight version of the heel Shawn Michaels, especially that promo in Toronto, where he just ripped. No, it was it Toronto or Calgary? Either way, the Canadians hate him, and I just love it. It played them like a glockenspiel.
Man, I was the exact same. See, with the Shawn Michaels kind of stuff, I honestly thought he was just a commissioner. I didn't think he was anything, because I started watching wrestling like that late 98, 99 kind of time, when I think everybody got like Sky or VHSs and stuff like that. I don't know, it seemed like it was a deal across Scotland. Everybody seems to have just started
got Sky
at that point.
Time. I think it just became slightly more affordable at that time.
Yeah, I was like, because I'm always like, why has everybody got this at the same time? But I was like, I think it was NTL at the time. It was like in Glasgow, it was like NTL was doing like deals or something. I can't remember, but it would be like more affordable, and everybody just jumped on it. We're Scottish, we need to do that. But I never knew who he was till the 2002 period, and then when I seen that match and like the Survivor Series 2002 in the Elimination Chamber, I was like, this guy can actually wrestle. I thought he was just like a commissioner, and then I went back and watched like his kind of career against Bret Hart and stuff like that, which blew my mind. I was like, how did I not know this guy even existed? I just thought he was this weird commissioner guy coming out with shorts on, shouting at people.
I always keep it in his shorts.
It was just so awkward, like with the kind of suit jacket and the shorts and I was like, who is this guy? Like, he makes no sense. But you feel so stupid as a child, being like, oh, like he was like a great wrestler at that time. So the other question is, what's your favourite event of all time? What's an event you would sit somebody down and be like, you need to watch this because it's great? What's your favourite event?
See, that one's quite a hard one for me. I'm going to say Royal Rumble 2000 because the Rumble match is great itself. There's loads of good matches on the card, but also it's got that amazing street fight between Triple H and Cactus Jack. And it's again starting watching wrestling in the tail end of 1999, starting to run up to WrestleMania season and watching it sort of culminate. Well, the first sort of pinnacle at the Royal Rumble with that match. That was like one of the first matches that got me like hooked on wrestling. I was like, oh my god! And that was again a match of variety because it was a street fight, but there was wrestling in there. There was some hardcore wrestling stuff, and it was just everything that a wrestling match should be, just pure entertainment, and it had you gripped from start to finish.
Yeah, man.
So,
yeah. I always remember that one as well. That in the No Way Out 2000. I remember going to the shop at the time and getting the magazine because you used to do the kind of picture breakdown of the matches. You'd have like 3 pictures of the match. I remember going and getting the magazine to find out who won the Royal Rumble because I didn't watch it at that time, so I was too young. And then just like sitting there looking through it all, and then they've done the same with like No Way Out 2000, and that was the time when I was just like, this is I'm balls deep in this now. Like there's no going back. Wrestling's my thing.
No, I totally get that because I like not long after that, that's when I started getting Power Slam magazine, and monthly it was religion, like going and getting my Power Slam magazine and my Games Master magazine every month, and I'd sit and read them both to death. I mean, that entire month, because at this time the internet wasn't really, it was a thing, but it wasn't something that you had access to all the time. I mean, you would go on it and your mum would hear you shouting off because she was wanting to use a phone. So you couldn't sit and read all the spoiler sites. So I think that magazines read to death, like articles, reading them over time and time again. Oh, it was amazing. I used to love like Power Slam, and I think I used to read. I think it was called Wild World of Wrestling as well. That was a kind of kayfabe magazine. That was less insider though. Like they treated all the storylines like they were real. And I always remember like because I would speak about WCW, but I'd never seen WCW. Like I think I'd maybe kind of watched it in 1997 at my grand's. I think it had been on like there'd been a highlight of Hulk Hogan putting somebody through a table, but that was my extent of WCW knowledge. I remember watching it for the first time after reading it and World and WoW, and then watching it, and there's some maestro playing a piano on the stage. I thought, nah, this isn't for me. Off.
My earliest memories for WCW is going around my friend's house. Where it was on Channel 5 on the Saturday. They would do like the Nitro rerun from like that Monday. I remember he would go get some wrestling magazines, I'd get some, we'd get gaming magazines, we'd plug the N64 in, and then his dad would be like, WCW's coming on, we'd go sit, have some dinner and stuff like that, just these would sit and watch it, and that was like my earliest memory of WCW, and I've always sided with WCW because of that, like just that kind of going around my friend's house, me, him and his dad kind of sitting there, N64 on, having food, watching wrestling, but yeah, like those magazines back in the day, like dial-up connections was terrible, like you try to play video games and stuff like that as well. When that first started, it was like somebody calls, you lose lobby connection, then like you says, you're no on dirt sheets and stuff back then, you had to get those magazines, and it was like that whole month you just were reading it, scrutinise it, you'd finish it, then go back and go over everything that you liked, and we're old men now, but so
that's what I feel.
The final question, man, the one that always gets people, you can take your time with this, you don't need to like have an answer straight away. If you do, that's great, but if you could replace or add yourself to any match in history, what would it be? For me, it would be I'd replace Owen Hart against Bret Hart at SummerSlam '94 in that blue steel cage, because that's my favourite match of all time. What would your one be?
Oh, that's a hard one. That is a hard question. If you could replace yourself with any match,
or you can add yourself into the match as well. There's people that add themselves in, or you can, like, if I could wrestle as good as Owen Hart, I would replace myself in that match. I wouldn't go into what I was doing, because that would be terrible.
I think, I'm pretty happy with this. I think I would replace myself with anybody in the first tag team TLC match between the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardys, because that's one of those matches that's up there with that Cactus Jack street fight that you seen, and it totally changed my perception of wrestling. And to be actually in that match and involved in it would have been amazing. And also, I would just love to have seen how they actually planned everything together, because it is one of those, like, there's been loads of TLC matches now, and I think it's safe to say that that's still up there as at least top 3, one of the best TLC matches of all time. And I would love to have seen how they managed to plan it all together. And just, even if I can't be in it, can I be a fly in the wall and watch them do that? Because that would definitely, like, you would learn so much as well just from doing that. And you'd also be privy to how one of the best matches in wrestling was constructed, in my opinion anyway.
Definitely, man. I love that match as well, and I don't think there has been a TLC that's even came close to topping that. It's just like everything in it just works as well. There's always something going on, and like you said, I would love to have just been sitting in that room just to like take notes, to be like, okay, so what you doing now? Like, how are you working this? Because it's a great match. I always picked SummerSlam '94, that Owen versus Bret Hart one, because me and my gran used to watch that, and I can describe that match to you down to a T, but every time I watch it, there's always something new that I find. And if somebody's never watched wrestling, I put that on for them, because I'm like, it's got the colours, the story, it's in a cool blue cage, and it's an insanely good wrestling match. Like, if people are listening, haven't seen it, just wait to the end of this, then go get it, and then go watch the one that you said as well. But man, thanks for being on. Like, it was really, really cool, like, chatting to you. I'm loving your stuff at the minute. I think the goals that you've got and stuff like that, I can see you definitely surpassing them. You've got the look, you've got the in-ring ability, you're working on the social media side to build that brand as well. I don't see why you're not going to be a huge Scottish star. Hopefully you get that ICW, you'll be on the network and stuff like that, and then you can go down to just start travelling and stuff like that. I think it'll be really cool to see you in maybe another 5 years and be like, where are you now? Because it'll be huge. I think you're going to be the next breakout star for Scottish wrestling. No blowing smoke up your arse or anything like that, by the way.
Honestly, your words are really kind, man. I really appreciate that, and it's nice to hear it, because as somebody that's had a lot of doubts about himself and a lot of confidence issues, it's nice to hear other people say things like that, and it gives me a wee bit of belief that I can actually go and do something in wrestling. And I really appreciate you asking me to do this. Like, as I say, I seen your podcast with Colton Davies and just threw you a follow on Twitter, and coming to ask me like so soon after a follow just to do this, I was really pleased and happy to do it. It's been a really good conversation.
Man, I try and not follow people that like I watch. So like I was watching you guys, like Colton Davies was somebody that Shady Natris was like, talk to this guy, he's really cool. I was watching like a bunch of guys like Dean Ford, yourself, Ian Skinner and stuff. I try and not follow them, because like I feel like I'm kind of like a fan. Like I don't want to be like that weird fan person reaching out. But when you follow me, then I'm like, okay, it's fine. I can reach out, so that if anybody's waiting to be on a podcast or waiting for me to DM them, just follow me and you'll get that DM probably. But no, man, it's been really cool. If you wait there, I'll end the podcast and I'll tell you when this will go up. Not the kind of after information and stuff like that.
No, man.